They pushed me out, but I came back stronger with a secret they'll never see coming. My name is Danielle Morgan. And the moment I read the text, I knew something in me had finally snapped, but not in anger. More like a quiet final click of a door that I would no longer knock on. The message came in while I was confirming my flight to Colorado for the long weekend. Hi, sweetheart. Your dad and I are thinking of keeping Thanksgiving quiet this year. Just us, Lily, and her boys. You understand, right? I stared at it, not surprised. Just tired. That kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones when you've spent too many years pretending not to care. They didn't even say my name in the message. Not even a "how are you?" Just a soft, deliberate exclusion wrapped in fake gentleness. Lily, the golden child. Lily with her carefully curated life, her picture-perfect family photos, her weekly FaceTime calls, with Mom that I was never invited to join. Lily who cried when her oven broke and got a brand new kitchen while I was launching my consulting firm from a cramped studio in instant noodles. But none of that mattered anymore. Not really. Because the truth was I had already made my decision weeks ago. What they didn't know was that while they were planning quiet time, I had bought a 12-suite mountain lodge in Breckenridge. It sat tucked into the base of snow-covered pines wrapped in silence so pure you could hear your own heartbeat. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked miles of untouched forest. The kind of silence that heals, not excludes. It wasn't a purchase of anger. It was a reclamation, a gift to myself after years of being the leftover, the forgotten seat at the table. But I wasn't going to spend Thanksgiving alone, not anymore. I didn't want performance or forced traditions. I wanted warmth. I wanted the kind of laughter that didn't wait for Lily's permission to erupt. I wanted real family. I opened my contacts and tapped a name, Aunt Rosa. She had once driven 2 states just to be at my high school play when my parents got stuck in traffic. Then Uncle Victor, he'd built me a bookshelf by hand for my first apartment. Cousin Mark, Cousin Tara, even little Nate, who still mailed me postcards from every hike he went on. I texted one group message, spending Thanksgiving at my new lodge in Breck. Come if you want a weekend of sleigh rides, wine, and no judgment. By morning, 21 people had RSVP'd. Every suite filled. Not one spot needed for Mom, or Dad, or Lily. That was the moment I smiled, not out of spite, but relief. It wasn't about revenge. It was about no longer waiting to be picked. You see, I'd spent a lifetime trying to earn a place in a family that saw me as a shadow. But I didn't want shadows anymore. I wanted sunlight. The kind that poured through pine trees and flickered off wine glasses held by people who saw me, really saw me. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been left out by the people who were supposed to hold space for you, give this story a like and stay with me. Because this isn't a story of loneliness. It's a story of choosing something better. And the best part, it's only just beginning. I've always believed there's a special kind of silence in being overlooked. It doesn't scream or demand attention. It just settles heavy and consistent like fog on a cold morning. That was my childhood. Quietly being the second thought, the afterthought, the background character to Lily's sparkling spotlight. Even now at 37, with a thriving consulting business and clients stretching from Seattle to Miami, I was still Lily's older sister whenever Mom introduced me to someone new. Growing up, Lily got the cheerleading squad, the sleepovers, the extra scoop of mashed potatoes. I got the watch your tone and the hand-me-downs. When I won first place in a statewide science fair, Mom forgot to show up. Dad texted me 2 days later. When Lily redecorated her kitchen, the entire family group chat lit up with heart emojis. It wasn't just favoritism, it was institutionalized dismissal. Over time, I stopped sharing my wins. Why bother when every celebration turned into a segue for Lily's latest, her wedding, her 3rd pregnancy, her trip to Napa? But the funny thing about being invisible, you get to move in silence. That's exactly what I did 2 months ago when I found a listing for a remote timber-framed lodge nestled in the heart of Breckenridge, Colorado. 12 suites each with their own fireplace. A glass-walled dining room that overlooked the forest line. A stone hearth big enough for everyone I wanted to sit around it. I bought it the next day. No calls to Mom. No mention in the group chat. Just the quiet thrill of knowing I was finally building something that was mine, entirely mine. I flew out the next weekend with a local designer and my assistant. We spent hours choosing handmade quilts, ordering locally roasted coffee, and building custom welcome baskets filled with things my guests would actually love. lavender lotion, for Aunt Rosa maple bourbon, for Uncle Victor ginger snaps, for Cousin Tara's gluten-free diet. Everything was intentional, thoughtful, chosen. Because for once I wasn't trying to earn love, I was offering it. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a holiday. It was a beginning. A new tradition for people who'd never had a real seat at the table. For people like me. There was no room for resentment here, only clarity. Mom's message hadn't hurt me, it had freed me. Her words, "Just us, Lily and her boys," didn't sting because they were true. I wasn't part of their us, not really, and maybe I never was. But now I had an us of my own, a family that had shown up not because they were obligated, but because they wanted to. I remember sitting in the lodge's great room the night before everyone was set to arrive. Fire, crackling snow dusting the balcony, a cup of peppermint tea in my hand. I looked around and felt something unfamiliar, something foreign in its softness. Belonging. Not the kind you beg for. The kind you build. And I knew this Thanksgiving wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to myself that I'd always been enough. I just needed the space to see it. As the firelight flickered across the polished floors and snow piled softly on the windowsills, I whispered to the quiet, "This time I won't be waiting for a seat. I own the table." And come Thursday, that table would be full with laughter, with warmth, with love that chose me back. The first to arrive was Aunt Rosa. She had driven up from Vancouver a day early to help finish the setup. As soon as she stepped through the door, her eyes widened in wonder at the lodge. "Danielle, this is stunning," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me in a warm embrace. I could feel her genuine excitement, the kind of joy that makes everything else fade into the background. "Your parents really have no idea what they're missing, darling," Aunt Rosa whispered, as she pulled away her voice, low but full of meaning. It wasn't just a comment, it was a revelation. She wasn't talking about the lodge or the food or the beautiful setting. She was talking about the fact that people were finally showing up for me. And it hit me this was the family I had always needed. Not the one I'd been waiting for all these years, but the one I had created for myself, the one that had never asked if I was good enough or worthy enough to be included. They just showed up. Uncle Victor followed soon after, looking even more impressed by the space. His first words were a low whistle as he took in the panoramic view from the glass-walled dining room. "This place is unreal. You've really done it, kid," he said, giving me a knowing look. The pride in his eyes wasn't just for the lodge, it was for me, for how far I had come. And then came the cousins. Mark and his wife Cindy, who immediately started exploring every room, snapping photos and chatting excitedly about their plans. Cousin Tara arrived with her kids, immediately pulling me into a tight hug. "Danielle, this place looks like something out of a dream. I can't believe you did all this," she said, tears welling in her eyes. I realized then that they weren't just coming here for Thanksgiving. They were coming to see the new life I had built, the new chapter I had written for myself. They were coming to support me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The next few hours were a blur of activity. The lodge was alive with laughter, conversation, and the bustle of people catching up. The staff had everything under control, but I couldn't help myself. I had to check every detail. I assigned rooms with personalized welcome baskets, each carefully selected with thoughtfulness. The activity schedules were printed and organized: snowshoeing, sleigh rides, cozy movie nights, and of course the Thanksgiving dinner that was going to be unlike anything they'd ever had. As I walked around, making sure everything was in place, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not just the absence of chaos, but a sense of belonging that was rooted in my choices. This wasn't something I'd been handed. This was something I'd built from the ground up, something I could finally call my own. If you've ever had to fight for a place to belong, if you've ever built something from the ground up when it seemed like no one was watching, give this video a thumbs up. This story is for you. By the time dinner was being set, the atmosphere was electric. The kitchen was filled with the rich smells of roasted turkey, maple-glazed carrots, and cranberry-stuffed squash. The fire crackled in the corner as the kids played games around the fireplace. The warmth of the room was not just from the fire, it was from the genuine love and connection that filled every corner of the lodge. As the evening wore on, everyone gathered on the terrace, under twinkling string lights, glasses of wine in hand. I stood there for a moment, surveying the scene. There was something about this moment that felt different from any holiday I'd ever experienced. It wasn't about being with the people who had once made me feel invisible. It was about being surrounded by those who had chosen to be here, who had chosen to make me feel seen. We raised our glasses, and I spoke the words that had been in my heart all day, to the family who shows up, to the ones who choose us not because they have to, but because they want to. This was my family, not the one I was born into, the one I created. And that night, under a sky full of stars, surrounded by the people who had always supported me, I realized something powerful. I had spent so many years waiting for validation from the wrong people. But now I was living the life I had always wanted on my terms. The next morning when my phone buzzed, I was ready. The messages from Lily from my parents, they came flooding in. "We miss you, hope you're okay on your own." But this time I didn't feel the sting of exclusion. I felt something stronger, empowerment. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And this Thanksgiving. This was just the beginning. Thanksgiving morning at the lodge bloomed exactly the way I had envisioned it, except it was even more beautiful in reality. The sun peeked through a veil of frosted trees, bathing the timber-framed lodge in soft gold. The smell of cinnamon rolls and roasted chestnuts drifted from the open-concept kitchen, blending with the faint sound of laughter and footsteps on snow outside. I stood at the large bay window in my sweet coffee in hand, wrapped in a warm sweater, watching cousins Nate and Ella race to build the tallest snowman on the frosted lawn. Uncle Victor was already outside helping the kids gather sticks and pine cones. Inside, Aunt Rosa was decorating the long harvest table with dried flowers and candles, carefully arranging each place, setting like she was preparing for something sacred. And maybe she was, because this wasn't just a meal. This was a declaration. A declaration that we get to choose who surrounds us. I moved down to the dining hall and found Cousin Tara carefully adjusting the cider pot on the sideboard. "You sure you're okay with all this?" she asked, eyes searching mine, not with doubt but with affection. "I've never been better," I said honestly. "This is exactly where I want to be, with exactly the people I want here." As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. A message from Lily. "Happy Thanksgiving. Mom asked me to check if you're okay by yourself. We could FaceTime later if you're lonely." Lonely. I looked around. Aunt Rosa and Tara were giggling over centerpiece choices. Uncle Leo had just walked in with his wife and grandkids, arms full of pies and cranberry bread. The fire crackled. Kids squealed outside. Someone in the kitchen popped a bottle of champagne. Lonely, I hadn't felt this surrounded in years. I typed back, "Thanks, but I'm quite busy actually. Enjoy your quiet celebration." I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. That realization felt like shedding an old skin I'd been dragging behind me for decades. The photographer I'd hired arrived right on time, a young woman named Bethany, with an eye for light and a gift for timing. She moved through the rooms like a quiet observer, capturing the candlelit glow on the walls, the sparkle in the eyes of nieces sneaking extra whipped cream, the warmth of hands held across the table. When she showed me a preview on her camera, I nearly cried. "These could be in a magazine," she said, smiling. "The warmth, the joy, it's real." And it was. We weren't pretending. We weren't posting photos to mask dysfunction. There was no performance here, just presence. Later, I stepped out onto the back balcony, phone in hand, inhaling the clean, pine-scented air as the snow crunched gently under my boots. The distant chatter of my family echoed behind me, my chosen family, the ones who'd never once made me feel like I had to compete to matter. That's when my phone rang. The screen read, "Mom." I hesitated, then answered. "Danielle, sweetheart," her voice came soft, almost apologetic. "Are you sure you don't want to come by for dessert? Lily's making her pumpkin pie." I watched as Uncle Victor helped my little cousin onto a sled, the two of them bursting into laughter as they sailed down a gentle slope. "I'm actually hosting lunch right now, Mom," I said, measured. "Can I call you back?" "Hosting," she echoed. There was a pause. Then through the phone, I knew she heard it, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the sound of joy that wasn't hers. "Where are you exactly?" she asked slowly. "Breckenridge," I said. "I bought a private lodge here a few months ago." Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "You bought a lodge in Breckenridge?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Why didn't I tell you?" "Well, I guess it's the same reason you didn't tell me about Thanksgiving. I figured you preferred quiet time." I didn't say it with malice, just truth. And that truth, for the first time in our relationship, hit her like a door she wasn't prepared to open. The sound of snow crunching behind me made me turn. Aunt Rosa was standing there with 2 mugs of mulled wine. She handed me one and gave me a knowing look. Letting the phone rest at my side, I whispered, "They're about to understand exactly what they missed." And she just nodded. Good, it's about time. The stillness that followed wasn't awkward. It was liberating. This wasn't a war I was fighting anymore. It was a life I was choosing. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks and the sky turned a deep lavender, something shifted in me. The terrace lights flickered on warm strings of gold, casting soft glows over everyone gathered beneath them. The long harvest table stretched the length of the patio, already half filled with bottles of wine, baskets of bread, and a handful of curious kids trying to sneak bites of candied pecans. Laughter swirled in the air like the scent of cinnamon drifting from the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, watching it all unfold, like a scene I'd only ever dreamed about, people talking over one another, clinking glasses, telling stories so loudly they had to repeat punchlines 3 times just to be heard. No filters, no walking on eggshells. Just the symphony of belonging. I raised my glass and called gently, "Can I say something?" Everyone quieted, turning toward me, eyes warm and expectant. My heart pounded not with fear, but with something deeper, fulfillment. "I just want to thank you," I began, voice steady. "Not for coming all this way, though, that means everything, but for showing up, for always showing up." I paused, letting the words settle, letting the silence cradle the weight of what I meant. "To family," I said, holding my glass high. "Not the one we're born into, but the one that chooses us even when it's inconvenient. Especially then." 21 glasses lifted in unison. "To the ones who show up." The toast echoed across the trees, swept into the darkening sky, and I felt something break free inside me. Something old, something tired, and in its place something else bloomed, solid and real. I didn't need their table anymore. I had built my own. As we sat to eat, Chef Alain, now presenting course after course of roasted turkey glazed with maple-spiced pumpkin bisque and sweet potato soufflé, I caught myself glancing around, taking in the full glow of it all. The flickering candles, the hush that fell over the group as they tasted the truffle-stuffed mushrooms, the way Aunt Rosa beamed across the table like she was witnessing the greatest performance of her life. It was more than a meal, it was a reckoning. And as I looked around, I knew one thing with certainty: this wasn't a temporary fix to a bruised ego. This was the start of something permanent, a new rhythm, a new tradition. Then, like a reminder from the universe that my past hadn't disappeared entirely, my phone buzzed again. "Maybe we could see each other for Christmas," the message read, "if Lily's schedule allows." I nearly laughed, still conditional, still tethered to Lily, like my value remained sandwiched between the gaps of her availability. I didn't reply. I simply slid the phone into the inside pocket of my coat and turned back to my plate. As the conversation around me picked up again, I smiled. Because what my parents didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that while they were clinging to a narrative that had centered Lily for decades, a new story had already begun without them. And if you've ever had to carve your place at a table that never made room for you, if you've ever had to choose peace over approval, share your experience in the comments. Because someone out there needs to know they're not the only one. Stay with me for the rest of this story. It only gets better. The days leading up to Thanksgiving blurred into something almost dreamlike. Guests trickled in from all over Seattle, Vancouver, Austin, even as far as Montreal. As each car pulled into the snowy drive, the air filled with hugs, laughter, and shouts of recognition. Kids leapt from back seats, bundled in puffy coats. Aunts brought jars of preserves. Uncles carried guitars and flasks. The lodge pulsed with life. It wasn't loud, but it was full of meaning, of stories of long overdue reconnections. The great room became our central hub, a warm haven, with a towering stone fireplace and velvet couches piled high with soft plaid blankets. People lounged with spiced cider, swapped road trip tales, and helped prep stuffing while a holiday playlist hummed in the background. Everything about it felt sacred, though we never said so out loud. I watched them all with quiet gratitude. These weren't just relatives. They were my real family, the ones who remembered to call when I landed a client I'd been chasing for months, who sent cards on my birthday without prompting. The ones who didn't need Lily's approval to love me. And I hadn't realized just how deeply I'd needed this until it was here. Late one afternoon, Cousin Tara found me upstairs, hanging fairy lights along the hallway banister. She stood there a moment, arms crossed, watching me work. "I'm proud of you," she said finally. I blinked. For what? For pulling this off, for knowing you deserved it, for not inviting them. I smiled, heart heavy in the best way. They made that decision for me. I just stopped arguing with it. We headed downstairs together where kids were piling on beanbags for movie night, and someone had started a makeshift marshmallow roast in the fireplace. No one was checking their phones. No one was waiting for Lily to walk in and make the room about her. That night, after most had gone to bed and the last round of hot cocoa had been sipped, I stayed by the fire with Uncle Leo. He stared into the embers for a long time before speaking. "You know," he said, "I always knew there was something in you, something they refused to see." I swallowed hard. "They didn't reject you because you lacked anything," he continued. "They did it because you had something they couldn't control. And that scared them." Those words landed like a stone dropped into a still lake. They rippled through every memory I had of being talked over, second-guessed, diminished. "I don't think they meant to hurt me," I murmured. "That doesn't mean they didn't," he replied softly. And he was right. Intention doesn't erase impact. I stared into the flames, letting their warmth crawl up my arms and settle into my bones. That was the difference between the family I was born into and the one I had built. This new family didn't just love me, they saw me. They didn't tolerate me, they chose me. Not because I fit a role, but because I was whole even when they first met me fractured. Tomorrow was the big day, the day I had spent weeks preparing for, maybe years, in my heart. The menu was set, the dining room was ready, the people I loved were here, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't wondering who might not show up. I wasn't hoping for one last-minute call from Mom or waiting for Lily's flight delay to become a dramatic story at dinner. I didn't need any of that, because I had already arrived into my own life on my own terms. And the table, it was already full. Thanksgiving morning greeted us with a snowfall so soft and pristine it looked like powdered sugar dusted over the entire landscape. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting golden beams onto the lodge's wooden floors, and somewhere in the distance I heard the jingle of sleigh bells, real ones, from the early morning ride some of the cousins had gone on. Downstairs, the lodge was alive. The scent of roasting turkey sage and cinnamon swirled through the air, blending with bursts of laughter and the squeals of kids dashing between rooms in fleece pajamas and fuzzy slippers. Alain, our chef, was in the kitchen, slicing cranberry-stuffed squash while whistling along to a classic Motown record spinning on the turntable. I wandered through the halls, warm coffee mug in hand, just soaking it all in. This was everything I'd imagined. And yet the universe, in its twisted sense of humor, couldn't resist one more test. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again and again. 3 messages. "Lily, happy Thanksgiving. Mom's wondering if you're doing okay by yourself. Mom, hope today isn't too lonely, sweetheart. We'll be thinking of you. Dad, you're always welcome to swing by for dessert." I stared at the screen. Was this guilt? Or just damage control, now that the photos were beginning to trickle onto social media? Bethany, our photographer, had already sent over a few previews, cousins laughing over cider, Aunt Rosa tearing up at the table, setting the kids tangled together in a snowball fight. And people were sharing them. Thanksgiving at Danielle's lodge is magical. This is what the holidays are supposed to feel like. I could imagine Mom's face now, holding her phone, watching the comments roll in. Realizing slowly, deeply that I hadn't disappeared, I'd simply stopped inviting her into my joy. As if on cue, Bethany walked over, camera in hand, eyes wide with excitement. "Danielle, these belong on a billboard," she said. "I've never captured anything quite like it." I took the camera from her hands and flipped through the images. Warm light bouncing off wine glasses, Tara laughing mid-bite, little Grace asleep on Uncle Victor's chest, a half-eaten cookie still in her hand. None of it was posed. It was real, unfiltered, honest. And in every photo I looked free. I handed the camera back and gave her a smile. "Let's take one more, everyone together before the food is served." She nodded and disappeared into the next room, already wrangling the cousins. Outside on the back deck, we gathered scarves, coats, boots, flushed cheeks, and uncontainable energy. Bethany crouched to get the perfect angle. 1, 2. I glanced at my phone just as she clicked the shutter. Another message from Mom. "We're just sitting down. Lily made her pumpkin pie. Wish you could taste it." For a second, I considered replying. But then I looked around. My arms were around Tara and Nate. Uncle Leo was holding up a peace sign behind someone's head. Aunt Rosa squeezed my shoulder. And just beyond the camera frame, Alain was placing the final dish on the table inside. I slipped the phone into my pocket and whispered to myself, I've already had something better. I didn't need pumpkin pie. I had belonging. And if you've ever had to smile through the ache of being left out only to realize you were always enough, leave a comment below. Let someone else know they're not alone, because here you're seen, and your seat at the table, It's already waiting. Now excuse me. The turkey's ready, and the family I chose is hungry. The Thanksgiving meal was nothing short of breathtaking. The dining room, once just a vision in my head, was now alive with flickering candles, polished flatware, and a soft hum of conversation that only paused when each course arrived. Outside, the snowy landscape gave way to a sunset so vivid it looked painted streaks of coral amber and violet splashed across the mountain peaks like brushstrokes on canvas. Chef Alain outdid himself. Maple roasted turkey, wild mushroom risotto, truffle, green beans, cranberry brioche stuffing, and a pumpkin tart drizzled with cinnamon cream that even the pickiest of the kids couldn't resist. And of course, wine bottles from the Okanagan Valley passed from hand to hand like secret potions, each sip warming our laughter a little more. I watched from the head of the table, not because I wanted attention, but because I needed to take it all in. These weren't just guests. These were people who had built me back up in the moment's life, or my parents had torn me down. The ones who reminded me in their small, steady ways that I mattered, that I belonged, that I was more than the space Lily hadn't filled. And tonight we were full. A food of joy, of something too sacred to define. Bethany, the photographer, moved through the room like a quiet spell, capturing everything Uncle Victor retelling his infamous moose encounter story. Cousin Nadia struggling to pour cider without knocking over a candle. Aunt Rosa pretending not to wipe away tears when we toasted to the ones who choose you when others don't. And in that golden, glowing moment, I realized something. I wasn't thinking about who hadn't come. I was thinking about who had. That, I realized, is what healing looks like. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums softly between bites of roasted squash and shared glances across a dinner table. Sometimes it doesn't need to be spoken at all. But as the plates cleared and dessert was served, my phone started buzzing again insistently. I glanced down. 5 missed calls. 3 from Mom, 1 from Lily, and 1 surprisingly from Dad. It was tempting to answer, to hear their voices if only to listen for cracks in their certainty. But I didn't. Not out of bitterness. Out of peace. Instead, I turned to Bethany and whispered, "Can you take one last shot, all of us, right here under the lights?" She nodded, and as everyone scooted closer, linked arms leaned in, she snapped a photo that I knew would become legend in our family for years to come. The kind of photo people frame, the kind of photo that says this was real, this was ours. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed and only a few embers glowed in the fireplace, I stood alone on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars blink overhead. My phone buzzed again, a message from Lily. "Mom's really upset. People keep asking where we were. The Kowalskis even canceled Christmas dinner with us. They said they're going to your New Year's instead. You never even invited us." I smiled faintly. I hadn't needed to. Because the thing about building a life where you belong is that people naturally want to be a part of it. I stared out into the dark forest lit only by moonlight. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned around and went back inside where my people were, where my story was being written one memory at a time. Hoy Chat GPT. The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke to the scent of fresh maple scones baking in the kitchen and the sound of children laughing somewhere beyond the frosted glass. I stepped onto the balcony wrapped in a thick cardigan mug of coffee warming my hands. Below me, cousins were gathering on the snow-dusted deck for breakfast, while the little ones hurled snowballs and made angels in the untouched white blanket of morning. It felt surreal, like I had woken up in someone else's fairy tale. But it was mine. Every detail, every voice, every footprint in the snow. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications lit up the screen. Bethany had uploaded the first batch of photos overnight, and the floodgates had opened. Cousins were tagging me in stories, posting reels of our sleigh ride, slow-motion videos of Uncle Leo dancing after too much mulled wine, and a perfect still of our candlelit dinner sunset spilling through the windows like liquid gold. The response was explosive. Comments rolled in from neighbors, old friends, even people from my parents' church and social circles. "Where is this lodge, Jos? Why weren't Catherine and Robert there? This looks magical. Danielle, this is incredible." The story of the forgotten daughter was now center stage. And not because I asked for it, but because I built something too bright to ignore. Then Lily called. Her voice came sharp-laced with something between panic and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. "A lodge in Breckenridge. With everyone, Mom is freaking out." I sipped my coffee slowly, watching frost catch the pine branches outside the window. "Like you told me about your 4th of July party, or the twins' birthday dinner." "That's different," she snapped. "Those were small." "No, Lily," I said calmly. It's not different. You mom and dad built your little bubble. I just finally stopped knocking on the glass. There was a beat of silence. Then the sound of one of her twins crying in the background. Her voice softened, but only slightly. Mom's devastated. Her friends keep asking what happened. The Kowalskis canceled Christmas dinner with us to come to your New Year's party. That made me pause. I hadn't even told anyone about a New Year's party. Apparently the family had decided that for me. I guess Mom got the quiet Thanksgiving she wanted, I said, still staring out over the snow-covered treetops. Lily hesitated. It was boring. Dad snored through football. The kids were restless, and Mom just kept checking her phone. I didn't say anything for a moment. I wanted to let her sit with that. It wasn't what Thanksgiving should be, she finished almost in a whisper. No, I agreed, stepping back inside where the scent of spiced cider and roasted apples filled the lodge. It wasn't. I slid the phone into my pocket and headed to the dining room where real family waited already. Laughing, already pouring coffee, already asking about the snowmobile tour Uncle Leo had promised to organize. It struck me how easy it was to be part of this group. No measuring up, no tightrope of approval, no competition for attention, just presence. I helped lay out the last of the scones and sat beside Cousin Nate, who was showing his camera roll to a group of awestruck nieces. As I listened to their voices, young and old, overlapping in joyful chaos, I felt a sense of home settle into me like never before. And for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to earn a seat. I was the one setting the table. By mid-morning, the lodge was buzzing again. Uncle Leo had successfully organized a snowmobile tour, and half the group was already bundling into their winter gear, passing helmets and laughing like teenagers. Inside the kitchen was a flurry of hands as leftovers were reheated, coffee refilled, and more pastries mysteriously disappeared before making it to the table. And then my phone rang. Dad. I stared at the name on the screen for a long second, thumb hovering. Something in me hesitated. Not because I was afraid of what he'd say, but because I already knew. I answered. Princess, he said, using the tone I hadn't heard since I was a little girl. That soft, practiced voice reserved for when he wanted me to bend. Your mother and I have been talking. We think this whole situation got out of hand. I didn't respond. I glanced out the window instead. The cousins were helping each other zip up coats, trading mittens, falling into snowdrifts, laughing. The kind of chaos he would have complained about. We just want unity, he added, like we always have. I nearly laughed. Unity? You want unity, I said finally, but only when it centers around you. Around Lily. Around your version of what family looks like. His voice tensed. That's not fair. Isn't it? I walked slowly through the hallway, the sounds of real family surrounding me like a soundtrack I never wanted to pause. You told me to stay quiet every time I spoke up. Every time I wanted to be seen, you told me not to ruin the moment. Well, I stopped trying not to. Silence. I paused near the fireplace where Aunt Rosa and Tara were sipping tea, flipping through Bethany's photo proofs. One of them was of me standing at the head of the table, candlelight in my eyes, laughing with my mouth wide open. Not holding back. Not shrinking. You didn't just leave me out this year, Dad. You've been leaving me out for years. I just finally chose to stop sitting in the hallway waiting for someone to open the door. He exhaled slowly, and for the first time I thought I heard something behind the carefully curated authority in his voice. Regret. But hosting a Thanksgiving without telling us. Buying a lodge without inviting us, he asked. You planned holidays around us like we weren't part of the family. Now you know what it feels like, I replied gently. There was another long pause, the kind that says everything more clearly than words ever could. No, he said finally, his voice tight. It doesn't feel good. Then maybe next time you'll remember that. I looked out again. Uncle Leo had just pulled a snowmobile into view, the kids screaming with joy on the back. Dad, I added, voice soft but unyielding, I have to go. Uncle Leo's waiting. I ended the call. And if you've ever had to be the one to walk away from the table that wouldn't make room for you, if you've ever had to create your own space, your own traditions, your own peace, leave a comment below. I read every single one. And somewhere in your story, someone else will find courage. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can say isn't I forgive you. It's simply I'm done waiting. The next few days unfolded like something out of a winter storybook, except we weren't characters acting out a script. This was real. This was chosen. We snowshoed through quiet pine forests blanketed in snow, the only sounds being the crunch under our feet and the distant laughter of cousins trying to race each other without falling. At night, we gathered in the media room for game nights, lit by firelight, and Christmas-scented candles. No forced smiles, no tension behind tight holiday photos, no one waiting for Lily to arrive before dessert was served. One evening, Chef Alain led a private cooking class in the open kitchen. We made elk tenderloin with rosemary, maple creme brulee, and wild mushroom risotto. Everyone had a role. Uncle Leo insisted on flambeing something and nearly lost his eyebrows. The kids turned leftover pie crust into weird shapes they proudly called Thanksgiving monsters, and Bethany snapped away, capturing even the smallest joy. Every room in the lodge buzzed with motion and memory. The smell of pine and fresh-baked pastries lingered in the air. People left their phones in pockets. No one scrolled, no one posed. We just were. Then the posts began. Cousins shared reels. Bethany sent edited images. The group photo on the snowy deck. Aunt Rosa tearing up during the toast. A candid of me mid-laugh holding a glass of red wine under fairy lights. And one by one the world outside our little bubble started watching. Old family friends from back home began commenting. "Where is this place? This looks like the holiday of a lifetime. Danielle planned this, it's stunning." Suddenly my parents weren't just excluded, they were publicly absent. They hadn't known the table would be this grand. They hadn't known the seat they gave up would become the most desired. It wasn't revenge, it was just visibility. They had spent years minimizing me, dismissing my accomplishments, skipping over my milestones like speed bumps on the road to Lily's latest upgrade. Now the world they had tried to impress was asking why they weren't invited, and I didn't say a word. I let the photos speak. I let the joy radiate without defense or justification. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I sat on the front porch under a sky heavy with stars and read through the comments. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. "Your father and I have been thinking about Christmas." I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I opened Instagram and saw something I hadn't expected. Lily had added me to her close friends list. For the first time, ever. I smiled. Not because it meant anything, but because I knew what was coming. And if you've ever been underestimated, ever been the quiet one, they didn't think would bloom. Remember this. It's okay to grow where they didn't bother planting. If this part of the story hit home, leave a comment. Like subscribe or just say hi. You never know who's waiting to see your light shine, just so they know they can glow too. Hoy, ChatGPT. In the days following Thanksgiving, the atmosphere around the lodge felt like a warm bubble that shielded us from the cold outside. The air was filled with stories, old family tales shared late into the night, new memories forged during lazy afternoons by the fireplace, and quiet moments of reflection in the snow-covered woods. One afternoon, Aunt Rosa gathered us in the living room to talk about plans for the upcoming holidays. The energy in the room was electric, a mix of excitement and anticipation. "We should start new traditions," she said with a smile. "One where everyone is truly seen and loved, no matter where they come from or what the past holds." Her words echoed in my mind. For so long, I had clung to the hope that my place in the family could be earned, restored, or at least acknowledged. But here, surrounded by the people who had chosen me freely, I realized that belonging wasn't about fighting for approval, it was about finding your own tribe. The children played outside, their laughter ringing like bells. Inside, we prepared a feast for the following day, hearts full and ready to welcome the future. Meanwhile, my phone stayed mostly silent, except for one persistent buzz. It was a message from Lily. "Mom and Dad want to talk to you about Christmas." I hesitated, then replied, "I'm happy to listen." It wasn't about reopening old wounds or rekindling painful conversations. It was about setting boundaries and choosing healing over conflict. That evening, as I sat by the fire, I thought about how far I'd come from being the overlooked daughter to the woman who owned her story and her space. The lodge wasn't just a retreat. It was a symbol of my growth, resilience, and self-worth. A place where I was no longer a footnote, but the author of my own narrative. And with every sunset that painted the mountains in gold and purple hues, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. If you've ever felt pushed aside or undervalued, remember your story isn't over until you say it is. Share your journey in the comments and let's lift each other up. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the permission to belong to ourselves first and foremost. The weeks that followed were a blend of quiet joy and quiet reflection. I spent mornings sipping coffee on the balcony, wrapped in soft blankets as the sun rose over the snow-covered peaks. Afternoons were filled with calls and messages from friends and cousins who felt rejuvenated, connected in ways they hadn't for years. I found myself thinking about the patterns that had shaped my life, how often I had tried to fit into molds, not meant for me, how often I had silenced my own voice to keep peace. But here, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, those old stories felt distant like echoes from someone else's past. One evening, as the group gathered for a cozy movie night, I caught a glimpse of Aunt Rosa watching me from across the room. Her eyes shone with pride and understanding. She came over and whispered, "You've built something truly beautiful here, Danielle. Something they couldn't see, but we did." Her words settled deep within me, a reminder that sometimes love comes in unexpected places, and sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Mom, tentative and softer this time. "We'd like to make things right. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a moment before typing back, "I'm willing when you are." It wasn't about reopening old wounds or demanding apologies. It was about opening a door on my terms at my pace. Because the most important family is the one where respect and acceptance come first. As the snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in white, I felt a quiet peace settle inside me. A knowing that no matter what, I was no longer waiting in the shadows. I was glowing in the light I had created. If you're ready to stop waiting for others to include you, if you're ready to claim your own space and build your own family, share your story below. Because your voice matters, and your seat at the table is waiting. As the holiday season unfolded, I began planning a New Year's celebration at the lodge, an even bigger gathering this time with more friends and family who had become part of my life. The excitement was palpable as we arranged sleigh rides, wine tastings, and cozy fireside storytelling sessions. The lodge was transforming from a retreat into a home filled with laughter, love, and shared memories. The contrast between this and the quiet, tension-filled holidays I'd known before was stark. No forced smiles, no whispered criticisms, no feelings of being invisible. Instead, there was warmth, acceptance, and genuine connection. One evening, while watching the snow fall softly outside, I received a surprising text from Lily. She had added me to her close friends list on Instagram, something she had never done before. It was a small gesture, but to me it signaled a shift, a crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. But I knew real healing would take time. It wasn't about instant forgiveness or forgetting past hurts. It was about growth, understanding, and choosing to move forward. As I looked around the lodge filled with people who had chosen me, I felt a deep gratitude. Not just for the family I had built, but for the strength it took to walk away from a place where I wasn't valued. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stop waiting for others to include you and start including yourself. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to create your own family or find your own light, please share your experience in the comments. Together we can remind each other that we're never truly alone. Let's continue this journey of courage and belonging one story at a time. The winter days grew shorter, but the warmth inside the lodge only deepened. The stories shared around the fire became the threads that wove us tightly together, and I realized this was more than a holiday getaway. It was a turning point. I was no longer the overlooked daughter waiting in the wings. I was a woman standing firmly in her own light, surrounded by a family who had chosen her wholeheartedly. One evening, as the last embers of the fireplace glowed low, I sat with Aunt Rosa and Uncle Victor. They shared stories of their own struggles, times they'd felt unseen and unheard. It struck me how often our lives were marked by these invisible wounds, and yet how healing comes not from others' recognition, but from our own acceptance. That night, my phone buzzed again, a text from Mom, hopeful but cautious. "Honey, your father and I want to talk about Christmas." I read it slowly, feeling neither anger nor urgency. This time I was ready not to mend broken ties hastily, but to set boundaries and choose peace. As I put my phone down, I looked around at the people who had built this moment with me. They had taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about love, respect, and choosing to show up. And in that moment I understood that my journey wasn't about seeking approval, but about creating a space where I belonged. If you're ready to step into your own light, to build the family you deserve, and to embrace the power of choice, I invite you to share your story below. Because together, we are stronger. And remember, your seat at the table is waiting. It's time to claim it. As the snow settled softly outside and the lodge hummed with quiet contentment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the family I had found, but for the courage it took to find it. Years of feeling unseen and unheard had led me here to a place where I was not just accepted, but celebrated. The holidays had never been about perfection or tradition. They were about connection. about being surrounded by those who choose you for who you are not, who they want you to be. In the stillness of that winter night, I realized that belonging isn't something you wait for, it's something you build. It's the laughter shared over a simple meal, the hands held during a snowball fight, the stories told late into the night by firelight. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own life, know this: you have the power to rewrite your story, to create a space where your voice matters, where your presence is cherished, where your heart can finally rest. Thanksgiving at the lodge wasn't just a celebration of food or tradition. It was a celebration of resilience, of choice, and of the unwavering human spirit to find or create home. So if you're listening and you feel lost or invisible, I see you. Your story matters, your light is needed, and your seat at the table is waiting. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for choosing yourself today.